Hey, welcome to my unrehearsed and unedited writing inquiry questions session. So this follows on from yesterday's preliminary research where you found your individual or group that you're going to research. So you can't actually do this stage of the process without knowing who your individual or group is, okay? If you haven't got that, go back, find them, and then come back again, okay? So if you're ready to start writing your inquiry questions, you need to get your research journal. You find your research journal in the class 1 note, in the assessment, in the research journal. Okay, it's right there. So save a copy into your folder for humanities. Okay. Oh, let me go back. So we're going to have a look at why we write inquiry questions. You're going to know the purpose of writing inquiry questions to guide your historical research, and you'll be able to develop your inquiry questions into your research journal. Ready to start researching next week. Okay, so we're going to have some explanation of why we write these inquiry questions the way we do and how you can get to your inquiry questions. And I'll let you sort of brainstorm an example with you. If you happen to be doing Eddie Marbo, this is a free one for you. Okay. Let me just quickly run through assessment dates. Drafts are due week 5. That's your research journal and your podcast script. Bare minimum for your podcast script is 3 body paragraphs. That's 3 out of 6. More would be better. The more body paragraphs you can give me in your draft, the better the feedback I can give you to help you be successful in the end. Final assessment date is Thursday of week 7. It's the day before you go into exam block. Okay, that's our last humanities lesson for the year. All right. Needs to be a printed podcast script. Podcast recording is optional. I prefer a recording because obviously I like listening to podcasts, but it doesn't affect your grade either way. And your printed research journal. All right. So the reason why it's important to write your inquiry questions is because you are graded on how well you write your inquiry questions. You're also, as you know, graded on how you process, so how you analyze, evaluate your sources from primary and secondary sources, using the information that goes into your research journal to answer these inquiry questions you're going to be writing, your analysis of your sources, this goes into your research journal, and also your your analysis of the reliability of your sources, those sorts of things. All of this happens in your research journal. It's also a backup if you, for some reason, don't acknowledge, analyze and evaluate your sources in your podcast script. I can use this as a backup. However, if you don't have any source analysis in either location, I can't grade you on it. All right. Okay, the purpose of inquiry questions. Historical research is all about asking questions and then finding the answer to those questions. We work on our inquiry questions so that we're asking the right questions so they're getting the answer that we need. It really helps to focus your research, and so that the time you're spending researching is finding what you can use in your assessment and not loads of other very interesting things that you can't use. Okay, so we begin with our key question. We're going to break that down into our sub-questions. This is where your individual group comes in. Okay, now your research journal is designed to guide you through the process of developing your inquiry questions. That's what we're doing in this session. Then you go on to collecting your evidence, so your primary and secondary sources, analysing and evaluating that evidence for reliability, accuracy, bias, but also for corroboration. So for finding other sources that agree, the more sources you have that say exactly the same thing, the more you can rely on that information. And then organising your evidence. So we're going to talk about that when we get to drafting. Okay. All right, so the step 1 is your key question. So in the research journal, let me just flick back to real quick. In the research journal, here we go. So this is your key question right here. So how did whoever you are researching contribute to the development of human rights in Australian society? Okay, you add that in here. Then in here, this is where we start brainstorming. Excuse me while I just. All right. So here's my exemplar. So my exemplar key question: how did Helen Keller contribute to the development of human rights in American society? Okay. Obviously my exemplar is on a different subject, but it shows the same process. Okay, so here's how you can break down your key question and start off your sub-questions. So I've broken mine, I've colour-coded my sections of my question, and each of those can lead me to different lines of questioning. So how did Helen Keller contribute to the development of human rights in American society leads me to what actions did Helen Keller take? How did Helen Keller influence American society? Which human rights were Keller contributing to? How society changed by Keller's contribution? Then you can take those parts of your key question, and each of those you can develop further and brainstorm further. For instance, when we're talking about what actions, I need to find out what she actually did. Did she protest? Did she get some laws changed? Did she make speeches? What did she do? What was that influence that she had on society? What were the rights that she was fighting for? What were not being recognised and what ended up being recognised because of her contribution? So when you're brainstorming your questions, try not to edit or reject questions. There's a process further along where you start looking at your questions a bit more critically, but at the moment just get everything down, anything you can think of, absolutely anything you think of, and then these questions will lead you to refine your questions further. So once you have brainstormed everything you can imagine, let me just flip back to our inquiry journal. So this is where you brainstorm, so we do all this brainstorming. You break down your inquiry questions into here, everything you can think of, whatever you can think of. So once you've emptied your brain of everything, you can't think of another thing, you start looking at those questions and seeing if you can group them together. Are there any that are mostly on the same topic? Are there some that are all about one aspect of this process? Is it, do you have questions that are all about what was society like before? Do you have questions that are all about what happened after these actions? So you're trying to put them together so that in the end you can put them into your structure. So this is not where you start writing your essay. This is where you organise your final sub-questions to make sure that you have good inquiry questions per paragraph. So if you follow the structure, this first paragraph is about Australia before the change, or in my case, America. So how did Australian society, how was American society before Helen Keller came along? So let me show you my exemplar. That makes more sense. Alright, so here were all the rest of my brainstormed questions. What was she advocating? Why isn't she well known as a human rights activist? What branch of human rights did she advocate for? Okay, and then I ended up with them arranged into my structure. That way I can see I've got at least 2 inquiry questions per paragraph, so that I know that I'm going to be finding answers to these questions for each of my paragraphs. Alright, so I've got my before the change questions. So what rights were being denied? What changes did she want to see? No pun intended. What was America like for women, children, and people with a disability before Keller? Then our succinct biography. So what prompted her to become a human rights activist? How were her actions received? I would put in some very brief information about her. I wouldn't put in a long biography. She's actually quite well known, but I would have some basic biographical information: who she was, where she was born, when she was living, and so I would have to put something about the fact that she's known for being blind and deaf, that kind of thing. Then affecting change and making change. So this is about the actions that she took to make change in society. I've also got a question about how long it took. Was this a lifelong thing? Did it take her entire adult life? Was it a campaign that she ran for 5 years? I need to find that out. And then I've got the societal impact. So this is what American society was like after she had done the things that she did. So what were the effects? What was the legacy? You might also have things like what were the achievements? How are we better off now because of your individual's actions? Okay. So now I'm going to show you an example using Eddie Mabo. So as I said at the beginning, if you're using Eddie Mabo, you're in for a bit of a freebie. Okay, so I'm going to start with how did Eddie Mabo contribute? I'm going to put him in bold. Contribute to the development of human rights in Australian society. Alright, so if I take my my key question, So I've got how did Mabo contribute? I've got the development of human rights in Australian society. And I've got the human rights in Australian society. So I've got a few things to look at. So, like, same with Helen Keller, I've got, so how did Mabo contribute to human rights? I've got what rights did Mabo fight for? Related to this, sort of what rights were not being recognised? Related to what actions? So you need to find out whether your individual went on protests, or whether they wrote something, or whether they got some laws changed. You know, what was it? What were the actions that your individual take? Did they chain themselves to something? Nice. I will give you a tip about Eddie Mabo. Again, freebies. So, you know, you need to know things like, what is terra nullius? You need to know what is native title. How long did it take for change to happen? Oh, you can go on forever, really. There's a good starting point. So that's the initial brainstorm. I'm sure that if you keep going, you'll think of more and more. So there's going to be something that each of your individuals is particularly well known for. The reason I kind of choose Eddie Mabo as an example, because he actually was active in rights activism for pretty much his whole life. And so he was involved in things like the 1967 referendum campaign. But what he's most known for is this fight for native title. So when you're researching Mabo, you need to really concentrate on the native title element. It's very easy to get sidetracked and into all these other things that he did. He did a lot of stuff. Like, he's a really, he's a really amazing person. All right, so there's my freebie for Eddie Mabo. Okay, so the next thing you're doing after you've got your questions in there is reflecting on your inquiry process. And I mentioned this in class. I actually found that I had a whole series of questions, and then I started doing my research and found that actually she did all this other stuff I had no idea about, so I had to go back and adjust my questions. And that's part of the historical process. I mean, it's a natural part of the process. You're constantly going back and evaluating what you know, but also what you want to know. What do you want to know next? Okay. So I found that she did, like Mabo, she did all this amazing stuff for her whole life. So I had to really focus on one area. So, I had to decide, was it going to be children's rights? Was it going to be women's suffrage? Was it going to be disability rights? Okay. So then you start finding the answers to your questions. All right. So this is where you take your notes about the answers to your questions. So you've got a sub-question. You're taking notes. So yes, copy and paste a little bit. It's even better if you just sort of put it into your own words straight into your notes, because then you're less likely to then copy and paste it over into your final, and you kind of take out the risk of sort of plagiarizing or not acknowledging something. Most important part, so as well as your notes about what you're going to include in your podcast, is your analysis. Okay, so I've decided to highlight it because it's a little bit easier than trying to do ticks and things when it's digital. So this is a secondary source. So the first source is, I can't remember, it's a university thing. But anyway, so it's the article is called Helen Keller, Political Leftist Radical. When I retrieved it from the website, when it was originally published, who wrote it, etc. So this is source one is a secondary source. It is supportive of, so it's all, it's all about, yep, she's amazing, amazing, amazing. This is the brilliant thing she did. I've decided that it's relevant because it shows the range of issues that she supported and acted for during her life. Is it reliable? Yes. This journal, this writer, very well respected, and therefore I'm inclined to believe that what they're telling me is correct. And does it corroborate? So yes, it agrees with other stuff. Almost everything. I don't think I found anything that just doesn't corroborate with what I'm finding. And like I say, the more sources you find that say exactly the same thing, the more you can trust that information. So corroboration, finding other sources that say the same thing, is very, very useful. Because if you've got 6 sources that tell you the same information, you know that information is going to be very, very accurate and reliable. Okay, so good luck. We'll be researching in class next week, and then we start drafting the following week.